Thank you very much, Hayley. I know a lot of our patients and their families have found the support group really helpful. So thank you for that overview. We're moving on to our Q&A session and we've got about 20 minutes. Hayley will join us back again, as well as Laura, who we've heard from. But we'll also be joined by 3 of our charity partners. So we've got Phyllis Craig from Action on Asbestos, Diane Foster from Asbestos Action Tayside, and Rachel Gallagher from Clydebank Asbestos Group. So I'd like to thank you all for joining. Please pop any questions in the chat and I'll help direct these questions to our panel. So I guess, Laura, I'll start by asking a question that has been posted on ahead of schedule. That is, if a patient has got 2 separate asbestos conditions diagnosed around about the same time period, can they apply for compensation for both conditions separately or at the same time? I think you might be on mute, Laura.
My apologies, I was drowning out
Thank you.
puppy barking in the background. Yes, so the basis of any claim is the negligence rather than the harm that it causes. The harm that it causes is almost the end step. You've got to prove the negligence first. So provided those 2 conditions arose from the same negligent act, which is quite likely in an asbestos disease, then the claim will be made concurrently for both conditions. And the lesser condition, if you like, will be subsumed in the more serious one in terms of value. So it's not uncommon for us to see mesotheliomas or lung cancers or asbestosis cases where there's also a concurrent diagnosis of pleural plaques. The pleural plaques is claimed for, but the overall value of the claim is based on the more serious disease. But certainly both conditions would be claimed for at the same time within the same action.
Thank you, Laura. Next question, I'm sorry I don't have your name, but maybe if I could direct this one to Phyllis. This person said that their mum received a statutory government payout for being diagnosed and was told she could fight her case for greater compensation. However, at the time, she felt too weak to fight this. And I think quite rightly they've said, I think this will be the same for many who are diagnosed and trying to deal with the situation at hand. Can you offer any advice of what support that your group might be able to help with or provide for patients and their loved ones in these kind of scenarios?
I think for anyone who's diagnosed with an asbestos condition, our doors are open. We have a comprehensive welfare benefit advice sector. We also provide representation at all appeals. We provide monthly group support meetings to isolate people who have an asbestos condition and to reduce their isolation. We campaign vigorously on all issues which affect people with an asbestos condition. But for someone in that position, I think that we could sit down and we can look at their overall benefits that they're in receipt of and have a look to see if we can pursue anything for them and their families, because that's what we do. We would look at their whole family and see what we can do for all of them.
Thanks very much for that, Phyllis. I have another question here from someone signed on, Anne-Marie Rocks. Perhaps, Diane, I could direct this to you just to sort of spread around the panel. They've asked for the charities. Anne-Marie would like to know how the in-person visits are being received now in light of kind of COVID restrictions being eased, I guess. And I guess for all of you, have you noticed a difference in the numbers of clients contacting you throughout the pandemic?
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yeah, great. In relation to home visits, we've restarted them within the government guidelines and also took into account discussions with medical staff. So even now, I go out to home visits. It's something that Asbestos Action, hold very highly, is the importance of that face-to-face contact with patients and clients. So we restarted that. I do my checks before I go. I do my tests before I go on each visit. But I think the important thing is for clients is that it's led by them. So initially the conversation will be, would you prefer a home visit or would you like to continue with a Zoom type meeting or a phone conversation? I'm delighted to say that actually, since we've been able to open the opportunity for home visits, 100% of the people that I'm working with have offered and opted for the home visit. The feedback has been really, really good, and they've talked very openly about the importance of actually seeing someone face to face and actually having someone in their own home to support them through a very, very difficult time. You know, when you're diagnosed with such a complex condition, it is quite important to have that opportunity to sit down and be able to talk to someone. So yeah, I would say 100% that the home visits are very unique, but also hugely, hugely important to individuals.
Sure, thank you. And then I guess the question to all three of you, Rachel, Phyllis, and Diane, have you noticed a difference in the numbers of clients contacting you during the pandemic? Has it gone down any at all? And are you expecting kind of, I guess, an increase now that things are easing off? So, well, maybe Rachel, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think interestingly for us, when we had our AGM and looked at our stats, we had a decrease in pleural plaques cases, but an increase in mesothelioma, and also quite sadly, younger. A couple of younger people with meso in their 30s. But we reckon that was maybe perhaps due to the backlog of maybe x-rays and things taking longer, so pleural plaques being picked up in chest x-rays for other things and discovered. But we have started to see a rise again in pleural plaques. Our office has got busier again, just maybe to pick up on or follow on from what Diane was saying. I think that the people that have been fit and able have actually enjoyed coming into our office, maybe being able to get out. And for us, it's been great seeing people face to face, because I think, like the other two charities, we take a holistic approach to what we do, and you pick up on things more when you see people face to face. You maybe identify maybe that they might have mobility issues and need a blue badge and things. So the numbers are starting to increase for us, and there was a kind of a slight, I suppose, change during the pandemic.
Phyllis, are you starting to see people coming into the offices now?
Well, when the pandemic started, we did see a reduction in people coming into the office because most of the chest consultants weren't seeing people with lesser asbestos conditions. So they were quite rightly dealing with the more to do with COVID. So as time passed and the clinics started opening again, we did see more people with non-terminal conditions. But throughout the pandemic, I know that all the respiratory consultants have all been seeing the people with mesothelioma, and we have continued to see them. But our stats have really increased, and it's quite frightening because people used to think that it would reach a plateau in 2020, and because we're still seeing this increase, it's going to be difficult because they are younger, there are more females, and it's really nice to be able to sort of open the doors and see them and make them feel very welcome, because a lot of people were on their own and they didn't get out to see anyone. So as a sort of family, it was great to include them, and is great to include them now.
Thank you. Ailey, can I ask you a question? I think Rachel mentioned about the kind of other support that's available, so kind of applying for kind of blue badges and things like that. Do you know of kind of any other support that's available outside of the support group for patients and their families? For example, in the Highlands or Inverness, where you are?
Yeah, so where we are, you can get sort of benefits advice, also um, uh, I'm just trying to think on top of my feet here. So we can link in with other charities as well, sort of the Macmillan support that's available, and sort of, our programme at Maggie's as well. Sort of, we've got quite a number of other sort of supports, exercise, and also sort of yoga, sort of different practices that help. So the key thing, and the same with other areas in Scotland, is geographically, I think travelling big distances for people is quite a problem. So they're able to access quite a lot online, which is really beneficial.
Great, thanks. And I think that's important that the mesothelioma specific groups are obviously really helpful, but it's not just the mesothelioma groups that are available to our patients and their families. Like you mentioned, the Macmillan cancer support groups are one kind of, I guess, more general support that's available for patients and their relatives. Can I just go back to just some... Oh, sorry,
Selena. Yeah, it was just to support what you were saying. I think, hopefully, I speak for all three charities that I think as part of our role, and we go in and we actually will share other local charities and local organisations that are available in those areas. So things, as you say, certainly part of my role is when I go in for a first visit to somebody's home, I talk about Maggie's, knowing that they're in the area. As you say, knowing about Macmillan, knowing about Through Cancer Journey teams, various other organisations. So I think, all three charities would probably make sure that information is passed on to patients to ensure that they are aware of what's available to them locally.
Thanks,
Thank
Anne.
you.
Laura, can I come back just to sort of the kind of general process of claiming for damages? Is there kind of any costs to the patients themselves up front or down the line? And then separately, how are you finding patients who are coming to you with claims for kind of, I guess, the less obvious occupations? We've been hearing that it's not always just your direct shipyard workers or joiners. It's often a lot more females with kind of lower level exposures, but definite exposures in the workplace. What advice do you have for those kind of patients?
Okay, so firstly, most firms who specialise in asbestos work will, and I would advise anyone to go to a specialist firm when it comes to claiming for asbestos related disease. Most firms will offer what's known as a no-win, no-fee funding scheme, which is essentially that there's no upfront payment. However, if the case is successful, then there will be a fee to be paid at the end of the claim. However, everyone should check sometimes house insurance policies cover legal costs. If somebody's been a member of a trade union, they should always check with that trade union as to whether or not their case might be funded, and then there would be no deduction from their damages at the end of the claim. In relation to the more unusual exposures, which are almost now in the majority, in fact, everything comes down to the evidence. So everything comes down to what that individual can tell us in as much detail as possible about how and where and when they were exposed to asbestos. But all solicitors in this field will be enormously sympathetic to the fact that because of the nature of the disease, we are asking people to think back 40, 50, at times 60 years into their past and remember details about something which was probably quite incidental to them at the time. It's a really tough ask, and we know that and we appreciate that. And we will do all we can to help them in that recollection without, shall we say, suggesting anything to them about where exposures or how exposures might have taken place. But I think what I say to any client who's struggling, often when you're put under the pressure of a solicitor questioning you, your mind goes blank. And as I think the patient earlier described, when he was first asked about asbestos exposure, his immediate response was, no, I've never worked with asbestos. And that is so common that we see that until the person takes time to take in what they've just been diagnosed with, and then to start reflecting on where and when this might have happened. And I say to people, keep a notebook somewhere in your your living room or in the kitchen. And if anything, any little detail comes to mind, write it down and give it to us, because you never know how important that might be in terms of evidence. I think it's also important to say that there's an ever-increasing wealth of knowledge about where and when exposures took place in our firm, in other firms, as more and more of these cases are brought before the courts and brought to solicitors. You accumulate a significant amount of knowledge, and you accumulate a significant amount of potential other witnesses to the exposure. So even if that individual themselves doesn't necessarily recall how or when or where, it may be that we can assist from other information that we have. And there's a good deal of cooperation between firms, I would say, also with trying to find witnesses for one another's cases.
Thanks, that is really helpful, Laura. I'm probably going to close the Q&A with one final question to our charity partners. And again, it's a question for all three of you, so I'll just ask you in turn to give me an answer. And that's really, it was a question emailed in from a patient ahead of schedule, and it was really concerning awareness campaigns of the dangers of asbestos and things like that, and what your charities are doing in general to raise awareness. Often in patients who, like Laura said, they think it's insignificant exposure, or that it was just such a long time ago, for them then to sort of think back to what was significant, what wasn't significant. So for general kind of population awareness campaigns, what are each of your charities doing, or or anything else that you're aware of that might help patients and their families? Phyllis, will I start with yourself?
Okay. We're always continuing to raise awareness of the dangers of asbestos, especially in public buildings and schools. And we've recently just all learned that the Select Committee have stated that they want to eradicate asbestos in all buildings within a 40-year period. Now, that's okay saying that. There's a lot being done in England, but not as much being done here in Scotland. We also want to raise awareness of women who are diagnosed with mesothelioma, and we want to get away from this myth that women can only contract mesothelioma through washing their husband's overalls. We have to remember that women have always worked, and it's detrimental in the pursuit of their civil damages if they record somewhere that women have only been exposed through their husband's overalls. So we are doing things like that. We are working closely with the STUC, with GMB, Unite, Unison and the EIS on asbestos in schools. And we've already met with John Swinney and so forth. So we're doing a lot of work there. We're working a lot with the medical professionals and trying to do as much as we can to put back, because I think we all work in combination with one another and try and help one another. And so we're doing various things to raise awareness of the dangers in schools, for teachers, in hospitals, and all of the places where you don't necessarily associate the asbestos exposure. But I'd like to finalise this by saying thank you to Professor Blythe for all his hard work in pushing this forward, to you, Selena, and to the nurses, because it's just been fantastic how far we've come now, and for Meso UK, and also to Anna Morton, who's done an awful lot of work here as well. So it's thank you to you for doing this, and it shows how much you care.
Thank you, Phyllis. Rachel, I imagine the Clydebank Asbestos Group are also doing something similar to try and raise awareness of where asbestos might be.
Here at Clydebank Asbestos Group, we're a small volunteer-led charity, but we are, I would say, very much kind of embedded in the community here. We work closely with West Dunbartonshire Council, and we're also part of the Asbestos Victim Support Group Forum, which is a kind of umbrella organisation, and they do a lot of campaigning and lobbying. Social media is interestingly probably a big thing for us as a small charity, because it's a way for us to kind of circulate the campaigns and raise awareness through social media. But just as Phyllis says, working closely with medical teams, clinical nurse specialists, GP surgeries, and just trying to, I suppose as well, keep our name out there in the community so that people know where to go.
Sure. And Diane, how are things in Tayside?
Again, very quickly, I'm conscious of time for you. I'd like to reiterate that we probably support and do a lot of what both Phyllis and Rachel have said. We also are part of the Asbestos Victims Forum, which includes a number of asbestos charities throughout the UK. And a big piece of lobbying that they did was around the Cape case. And again, I'll not bore you with it, but it was the forum who took the lead in that, along with a lawyer down in Lee Day. And very, very proud to say that they actually won the case in the court, and so that evidence has now been preserved. Again, if you want to read about it, please go and have a look. From our point of view, continually doing events. We've just done an event in Fife. I'd like to mention, if you don't mind, we're doing a big mesothelioma event. It's our 20th anniversary this year, and Professor Kevin Blythe has very kindly agreed to speak at that for us, along with Liz Darlison, the Chief Officer for Mesothelioma UK. So that will be on the 7th of September in the Perth Concert Hall, and there will be a lot of invites going out to that. And so it will be celebrating the work that the Scottish medical professionals have done in relation to mesothelioma, but also we'll be doing support for our patients in relation to that as well, and our clients. So they'll also have a voice at that as well. So we continue to do as the other groups do, and are continually, putting them first. They're at the heart of everything we do, and I think I speak for all three charities when I say that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, everyone. I think that will draw us to the end of this Q&A panel. So thank you all. Next is just, again, a small comfort break for about 5-10 minutes. And during the break, you will see a video on Pilates for stress relief and anxiety by our wonderful Julie Roberts, who's one of our patient representatives. Thank you.